only thing I never see. They say this hour you man so low. But I thank me for the run the family. No, no bad mind boy, they can stop play. And every show I smiling cause trust me, life is so lovely. Whoa, and I'm far from finished. Whoa, and I can't believe it. No, see I'm far from finished. Whoa, love the life that I live in. I say na na na, I say na na na, say na na na, I 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 say na.
6:40, coming up towards 6:41 in Trinidad and Tobago. One of the concerns expressed by the Prime Minister, speaking in the aftermath of the earthquake on Tuesday evening, is the safety of our health institutions. And I think we should realize that the Prime Minister is probably an excellent person to speak to General, because he is a geologist. Probably more than many of our public officials. He'll probably be able to give us, beyond the politics, and if we could just leave that aside, a better understanding of the impact of what occurred, what we can anticipate, because I heard him talking about the whole plate tectonics thing of the subsiding plate and clashing plates and so on, so he could probably join us to talk about that, apart from the politics itself, because that's his area of expertise in that regard. But talking about the health institutions, the public institutions, on set with us now to tell us about some of the disaster preparedness measures in place at the Eastern Regional Health Authority. We have the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Ronald Tsoi, and Disaster Preparedness Coordinator, Alana Lewis, are with us. A very good morning to you both. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. And I should point out that while we're having our discussion with them, during the course of our dialogue, probably closer to the top of the hour, we'll try to reach one of the government ministers once again to give us some further updates on what has been happening with the aftermath, what is going to be happening over the next couple of days, especially in an immediate response to what happened on Tuesday evening. But good morning once again to our guest. Mr. Tsoi, just give us a sense from your perspective as the CEO, what happens now given what occurred on Tuesday? We had a bit of a tremor, an aftershock yesterday as well. What are you all doing as far as coping with this situation?
Okay, morning, of course, to Trinidad and Tobago. Let me just say that I would go beyond that, or before that.
Sure.
Because what happened yesterday, we're now in reactionary phase dealing with that. But in fact, in the ERHA, we have been putting things in place for the management of post-disaster occurrences and so on. If you look at the ERHA, for example, we start at Matlot in the north, and we come straight down till the south when we fall off the island.
Right.
So it's like a 1/3 slice of the island.
Right.
Which means that we have part of the north coast, and we have the entire eastern seaboard kind of thing of the island. And we have inland forested areas like beach and all.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because certainly myself would not have been aware that the Eastern Regional Health Authority basically goes all down to Guaya.
That's right, it does. So that what it means is that in planning, we have to take that into consideration, because it's many remote areas and so on, so that we have a proper disaster preparedness plan in place. Our facilities are all linked via radio communication, and so that coming back to this occurrence, for example, immediately post this occurrence, we were able to set up our command center, and Alana will probably tell you that it took very, very short time for that to happen, and to be in touch with our facilities and so on. And we continue from then with the preliminary assessments, making sure that everything is all right. And, you know, we're doing quite a lot. We're doing quite a lot.
Sure. And let me bring in Alana Lewis into the discussion, because as Mr. Tsoi said, systems in place, everything appear to function well in this instance. But I'm sure the concern will be, how well are we prepared, certainly in the area of the Eastern Regional Health Authority, if there were to be what you would want to call a major disaster? How much easier is it to operationalize all that would have been put in place?
All right. So firstly, with anything, when we talk about disaster management, we try to incorporate preparedness. We try to get the relevant persons involved, because we understand while we have entities responsible for disaster management, we all must take personal responsibility for the process. So what we try to do is build community capacity, build community resilience. We work closely with our regional corporations, with other stakeholders, and also with our staff. The key thing that we understand that is important, that is we prepare as best as we can. So what we also do is try to incorporate redundancy in our systems. For example, when these things occur, you have power outages. All our facilities are equipped with generators. So we have backup power, we have backup water, and we have backup communications through our radio systems. So we understand that critical systems are in place when these things go down.
And you mentioned the use of the phrase redundancy. For a lot of people, they look at that as wastage. They say, why you have all of this thing here, back up here, and we don't get no earthquake, we don't get no tsunami, nothing like that will happen here. How much of a challenge is it for people to be so disciplined in the various areas of the country, or in your area in specific reference, to ensure that these redundancies are always in place and are there specifically in the event of a disaster?
I think incidents like these prove the need for them. And as much as we want to say these things will not happen, we see that things are happening more and more. In our case, in the eastern region, in particular, northeast coast, from Matlaat go down to Toko, we have a lot of landslides. Areas tend to get cut off. We've seen very recently that in the Mayara Clara region, we have a lot of flooding taking place. When that Manzanilla Mayara Road is flooded and Mafican area is flooded, Mayara is cut off. So we understand, and I think the communities within our region, because they experience this and the risk is real, we understand. And then we also see the need to go out to our communities, because in the Eastern Regional Health Authority, we say caring is the key, and we try to filter that down to every level, be it our staff or any stakeholder, any team members, we will say. So we go into our communities and we educate them, we enlighten them. For example, last Friday, we held a disaster preparedness outreach program in the Mayara region. We collaborated with the Mayara Fire Station, the Mayara Clara Corporation, and the Cardiac Life Support Training Group to build that internal capacity. We also provided the participants with CPR training. So in the event something happens and you are unable to access what you need, we are telling you and we are preparing you and giving you the skills you need that you might be able to cope better with disasters.
And Mr. Tsoi, what to you would be the major area of concern? Is it resources, or is it just awareness of citizens? What to you is the major concern?
Well, I think both are areas of concern. You need to try to keep the citizens aware, and we are constantly engaging with our communities. Recently, we completed a round of community consultations in all our facilities where our staff engaged with the people that they served. And we talked about disaster preparedness, we talked about what they needed, and as a result of those consultations, for example, we've had outreach clinics that have been established. We're putting in an X-ray system into the Toko area, which again feeds into disaster management, because it provides us with an enhanced capacity, diagnostic capacity, on the coastline should anything happen. I need to mention also the issue of resources. Again, it means a commitment. So when you spoke of redundancy just now, when we spoke of redundancy and you asked that question, you know, the point is redundancy does not only affect you in case of natural disaster. If you have a health facility, you want to have generator capacity.
Yes.
So that part of your maintenance schedule has to be ensuring that this capacity is always available, so that you reinforce this and you build this into the culture, and you build a maintenance culture that redounds to your benefit when it comes to disaster, because the thing is there and running.
Is that working? Because I mean, forgive me if I sound blasé, but generally, when you look at a lot of our public buildings, sporting facilities, and so on, we don't seem to have that maintenance culture as effectively as we should have. Is it different at the health level, at the regional corporation, regional health facilities?
I will say yes. I mean, if you look at it, for example, we have 17 facilities, really, all right? And one of those facilities, that's the Matura Health Center, the generator had been malfunctioning, and it was actually being repaired, all right, at the time of this incident that just passed here. We had proactively taken all our vaccines and so on out of there in case anything like this should happen. And when you say 1 out of 17, because all the others were working,
right,
that tells you that in fact there is a commitment to ensuring that the plant is up and running at all times. Not only that, but we are collaborating right now, for example, with the Ministry of Planning and Development to move to a second level redundancy. So we're doing a pilot project where in Toko, for example, we are moving towards solar powered water harvesting, all right, and solar powered lighting and so on. So that even in the event of something, an occurrence like this, if your electricity grid goes down, we will still be able to maintain a level of services. So we're taking it even further, all right, to ensure that we are there for the community. Past this occurrence, we were able, as I said, to within 15 minutes, Alana?
Yes, so the earthquake would have occurred at 5:31.
Yeah.
By 5:45 p.m. our command center was activated, meaning that we had linkage through our radio network with all our facilities. We checked in with all our facilities. We coordinated the response from our command center to ensure that whatever requests were coming in for resources, we can facilitate.
And as far as that, you know, responding to something and testing the effectiveness, were you satisfied with the response and the way all the facilities, the systems kicked in after 5:31?
I have to say yes. At the ERHA, we have been on a mission to get everyone involved in disaster preparedness. Whilst the authority will have a disaster preparedness coordinator, and even on a national level, we have the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management, I say that unless we all take personal ownership for the process, it's not going to work. What we do is we have a very committed team, meaning all our staff members, who would have stayed at facilities longer than they needed to ensure that the care that was needed at the time was given. So much so that we've embarked on this initiative very recently,
right,
to produce a family emergency plan, which will be given to all our staff members. In this booklet, it's very interactive. It tells you how you can prepare. It tells you how to get your kids involved, what to do. Because again, health service is critical infrastructure. Some places might afford to close, they can't do that, but we can't afford to close our facilities and say we're not functioning. So we have to continue service delivery, and because of that, we know that as much as we have equipment and whatnot, we need our human resources there. So we have to build that internal capacity at every level.
And you know, Mrs. Go ahead, I know you wanted to make a point.
And it's important also because we are part of a national network in terms of healthcare. So that once the disaster command center comes up and we start getting feedback from the facilities, I am now able to pass that information on, all right? Because immediately upon, you know, I would see communication coming from the Minister of Health or from the Ministry of Health saying, what's happening with your facilities, all right? And that did happen. Minister was asking right away what's happening out of his concern. And so we were able to respond to say, okay, all facilities intact, all is happening well, you know, so that at a national level, in terms of coordination, we are part of that grid and part of that network.
I suppose, Mr. Tsoi and Ms. Lewis, the real test is when the disaster occurs. Yes. And even with the best will in the world, we see it in so-called first world countries, when a real disaster hits, as well as they may be prepared, there is still panic, there is still chaos, there are still so many things that happen. Mr. Tsoi, first of all, do you have models testing those, because let's say, for example, God forbid, there were to be an earthquake and a tsunami that inundates much of the East Coast, and highways and roadways are washed away completely. Do you sort of have like models that you take into consideration? What do you do when something like that happens, if it were to happen?
Okay, we do disaster simulation exercises, and apart from that, what we're doing is building the capacity gradually. All right, so for example, if you were to take you know, like a tsunami or something of the nature, we have a database in place, a human resource locator database that identifies where all our staffing would be, where they live, where they work, all right? All our shut-ins in the communities, where they live, and so on. So that post-disaster, as we've had it, for example, Mayaro has been cut off from Sangre Grande. We know how we can redeploy staff appropriately who live in Rio Claro or live in Mayaro as against who lives in Sangre Grande. We know also where all our shut-ins are and disabled people so that we can respond to those. So that I'm saying that you build capacity over time. And we are in the process of building capacity. Our internal administrative systems are in place. Our support systems in terms of the Ministry of Health are in place, all right? So that gradually we'll build capacity. We're not saying that if anything happens, that we'll be the star performers and everything will be fine.
Right.
Many times when you have disaster occurrences, you got to think on your feet and you've got to respond appropriately given, you know, what circumstances.
Indeed, I mean, and that's the reality. You could only really know how well the systems are functioning when you're in a disaster. And I mean, this is not like Avengers or some superhero thing where the X-Men could just fly in and just block everything or whatever. This is real. But we're going to pause in our discussion. We'll continue our dialogue in a moment. We'll get Ms. Lewis's perspective on that whole state of readiness situation in a moment. But we're going to be joined on the telephone now by Works and Transport Minister Rohan Sananan. Before we do that, let's take a break, and then we'll be joined by the Minister to give us an update on the impact and the whole level of investigation and an assessment of damage that would have been done and what needs to be done after what occurred on Tuesday evening.
Shazam Mohammed Contractors Limited is having a massive recession sale. Buy 9 pallets and get 1 free in grade 1 A-bell blocks, PVC fittings, sand, gravel, windows and water tanks. We also specialize in cement, red sand, steel and much more. Providing you with free delivery, SMC Limited is the cheapest around. So call now on 380-3558, 368-2807 or 478-4325.
There I was, dreaming of my new kitchen. Then one day, I found the perfect one at CW Interiors. They even said, we can build it in just 1 week. I was super excited, so I said, oh my gosh, are you for real? They did it. CW Interiors gave me expert advice and installed my new kitchen to my satisfaction. What more can a girl want? Any of these could be yours, so call them today.
Super Quality Supermarket will never be beaten on price. Come experience the ease of shopping from your one-stop for variety. Look out for our weekly specials. Locations in Trinity, Cuba and Chagonas. Call 223-9715. Super Quality, never beaten on price.
Reflect, a Brian McFarlane production on our 56th anniversary of independence, inclusive of cocktails and theatre. Featuring for the first time the Be Magnificent Voices Choir. With Wendy Shepherd, Kelvin Hutchin, Marlon DeBeek, Alethea Behari, Christian Mendez, Nigel Rojas, Rosanna Winchester, Marvin Smith, Christopher Tambu Herbert, and Edward Cumberbatch. Thursday, August 30th, 6 p.m. St. Finbar's Church, Diego Martin. Tickets available at Peter Elias Ellerslie Plaza and West Mall and the Dominican Book Center. Beneficiaries the Finbar Ryan Geriatric Home and the Christ Child Convalescent Home. Reflect, a Brian McFarlane production. See Facebook and press for details.
Just a few seconds away from 7 o'clock on the dot as we reach the end of the first hour of Morning Edition on this Thursday. And as you would expect, in the continuing aftermath of that earthquake of 6.9 magnitude on Tuesday, and indeed many people wondering how did we escape, and it's good that Joan Latchman was able to explain the issues of focal depth and distance from the epicenter. And it's really important for those with the scientific knowledge to be put in the forefront, rather than the rumor mongers and the stupidity that you get on social media, or the deliberate misinformation that you get on social media. It's important for us in the media to highlight the science associated with situations like this, for us to better able to understand the realities and try to dispel a lot of the rumor mongering, which will still continue. But we have someone on the line who hopefully will provide us with some solid information on the continuing fallout and the impact of the earthquake. We have the Works and Transport Minister, Rohan Sinanan, with us on the phone. Mr. Sinanan, obviously you're a very busy man at this time, even more so with what would have occurred from Tuesday evening. What is your sense now as to the impact on the infrastructure and the built infrastructure in Trinidad and Tobago following what happened on Tuesday evening?
Okay. Good morning, Fazir. Good morning to all your viewers. Based on the reports that we have as of last night, there have been no significant structural damage on almost all the properties that we visited yesterday. There were the cathedral in Port of Spain, the two churches in Port of Spain. Those suffered some structural damage, and the recommendation was that they remain closed until further assessments are made on them. On the other buildings that we inspected, and I think in all it could be about 40-odd buildings that we inspected yesterday, none of them had any structural damage. There were some cracks in some of them, but those were superficial cracks on joints and so that did not affect the structure. In terms of the road network, there were no significant or structural damage to any of the overpass, any of the bridges, and that exercise will continue today. But so far, we have not seen any major structural damage. There was one road somewhere in south that have some damage on it, but the road remains passable.
And as far as properly assessing this, Minister, will it take some more time? Because I suppose a lot of it has to do with how things look, for example, as well. If you, in the aftermath of an earthquake, and you're shaken by it emotionally, and you see a crack appear along a wall, how do you know, for example, as just an ordinary citizen, is that a superficial crack? Does that talk to some serious infrastructural damage that the whole thing could come down with the neck shake that could be had? How much work is being done by the experts, the technical people, to properly assess the areas where there might have been appearing to be some superficial damage?
Okay. For the team that have been assembled to do this inspection, they are professional structural engineers. What we did yesterday and even the day before, we actually sent out a call to all the private structural engineers, the companies, and I must say that corporate Trinidad, at least in that field, they came out. So we have a full team of professional structural engineers from the Ministry of Works and the private sector, and they're the ones who are doing the structural evaluation. This is not a layperson who doesn't understand engineering and structural engineering especially. So we do have a qualified team going out. So once they come out of the building and they tell us the building is safe, we do feel comfortable with the assessment that they would have made.
And what about the situation with the Port of Spain General Hospital? Because as is being reported, and indeed the Express has the story as well as part of its lead stories in the Express, about the situation with the central block, which was deemed unsafe and had to be evacuated?
Well, okay. The reports that I have from the central block is that the engineers who went in and did the inspection did not see any further deterioration on the building. What I mean by that, we know for a fact that Central Block has been an area of concern to the government. There are plans for the reconstruction of the Central Block, but coming out of the earthquake, there have been no further deterioration of the Central Block.
And as far as the wider citizenry are concerned, what advice would you give to citizens who might have noticed a crack appearing where there wasn't one before and wondering should they have it inspected by someone, should they contact the regional corporation? What should an ordinary citizen do if they are concerned about the integrity of either their dwelling or their business place?
Well, yes, Fazir, and you're correct. If someone has some concerns, what they should do is try to get in touch with a structural engineer, or if that is posing to be too difficult, what we recommend is that you may speak to the regional corporations, or you can even get in touch with the Ministry of Works, but it will be done on a priority basis, because our priority right now is to ensure that all government buildings are safe.
And as far as what is happening with the housing settlements, because one of the images we're seeing in the Express refers to the Mora Heights housing development in Rio Claro, which would be an HDC development. Is that also an area of concern at this time?
Well, the HDC, I know for a fact, will be sending out their engineers to visit any concern area that they would have, because the HDC does have a lot of engineers as well. Once we would complete our workload, we will be making our engineers available to all the state enterprises who have concern. This is going to be an ongoing process until we could, at least accomplish all the areas that people would have had concerns with.
And as a final perspective, Minister, we do appreciate you, as usual, taking the time to speak with us this morning. It's obviously a very busy time and a very anxious time for many people in Trinidad and Tobago. What is your own sense of the ability of the nation in responding to what would have occurred on Tuesday evening?
Fazir, I think if you look at the effects of the earthquake, I think the agencies did quite a good job in securing the nation. In terms of national security, the public utilities, all the agencies, rural development, they all came out, they came together, and that is why within hours of the earthquake, there was some semblance of, thank God that, everything is okay. Electricity went out in quite a few areas. Within hours, it was back on. So I think we were as prepared as we could be. However, we must understand that an earthquake is something that you can't prepare too much for, because you don't know when it is going to come. It's not like a hurricane where you probably could get 7 days notice of a hurricane coming. An earthquake is, I described it yesterday. If you look at it in medical terms, it's like a stroke. You don't know when it's going to happen. But the response, I think, from the agencies was quite efficient. And as of yesterday, most of the buildings in Port of Spain would have been inspected and given the all clear back that can be occupied.
Minister, thanks very much once again taking the time to speak with us as we come to around 8 minutes after 7 o'clock in Trinidad and Tobago. And that's why we really need to emphasize the science, because there's been all sorts of things going on. Somebody's saying that they see the radar showing them that another earthquake coming and all that sort of thing. I mean, it's a level of nonsense that is perpetrated by forwarding these things. Why do people forward these things and send these things when they know them to not be true? And it only causes panic among citizens who may not be as well aware. And you often have to ask yourself, why would people be so malicious in doing what they do to really pass on information that could only create panic, create anxiety among people who may be not aware of all the science associated with, and to realize you're talking foolishness. And that is why, again, whether on this show or any other media in Trinidad and Tobago, especially at this time, we need to emphasize the science and the accuracy and verify the accuracy of our information in providing it to the general public. We'll continue our dialogue with our representatives from the Eastern Regional Health Authority right after this break.
$56 meal, your perfect mix and match power meal. BK's 2 for $56.
It's what?
Awesome. We're bringing
bringing awesome back. BK Stew for $56 is serving up the Whopper and American Chicken Sandwich regular combos. Enjoy 2 of everything. 2 American sandwiches or Whoppers, 2 regular fries, and 2 drinks. All for just $56. Happy Independence TNTs. Awesome. Burger King, taste this king.
Accidents will happen, and if one should ever happen to you, call Forensis. Why? An unbiased damage expert will come and register the accident, complete with pictures, statements, and a situation sketch. This information will immediately be made available to your insurance company. The benefit? Your damage claim will be handled quicker and more accurately, all at no charge to you. Make accidents a little less stressful. Call Forensis 866-8888. We're your eyes on the scene.
Looking for a healthier way to snack? Then put some nuts in your nutrition with O-Snacks. Natural almonds, pecans, walnuts, Brazil nuts, pistachios, natural and roasted cashews. Bursting with hot, healthy goodness, packed with minerals, protein, and fiber. Grab yours today for a delicious and crunchy energy boost. Get snacking the right way. O-Snacks, a healthier choice.
Introducing the all-new Trinidad Express mobile app, now with improved features to match your dynamic lifestyle. Get live updates, see what's trending, and access breaking news on the go. Like, share, or comment on any article, and view pictures and videos of trending stories that bring them to life. Don't have time to read everything? No problem. The Express Assistant can read the full article to you. Plus, you can explore and discover more of our fearless journalism through our special features. Whether it's an interview or an editorial that you may have missed, it's available to you via the app. So don't wait. Discover all the possibilities with the new Trinidad Express mobile app. Download it for both Android and iPhone today.
I say, what's the reason, mommy? Is then she tell me, she say,
well, if we were really one family, we wouldn't be misleading one another with all sorts of foolish information, especially at a time like this. But it's 7:12 in Trinidad and Tobago. Let's conclude our discussion with our 2 guests from the Eastern Regional Health Authority. Chief Executive Officer Ronald Tsoi Fatt is here together with Disaster Preparedness Coordinator Alana Lewis. And when we left off our discussion, I was coming to Ms. Lewis, talking about those models as far as preparedness in the event of a disaster. How disturbing, how much does it throw off all the plans that you all put in place when people send false information? During the break, you alluded to something that happened on June the 19th. And how challenging does it make your job and those within the authority itself to reassure people when false information is being pushed out?
Right, so social media has changed the way information is shared. And one of the things we have to remember is where to go for information, especially when we need accurate and valid information in disaster settings. What we've embarked upon also, as I say, awareness building is one of our key components of preparedness at the authority. And what we do, for example, in our monthly newsletter, we share where you get your information. And any opportunity during training seminars, we share where our staff and where the community in general, where do you get your information? If you need reports on the weather, you go to the Met Office, National Context, you have the ODPM, the Mayor Rio Claro Corporation, or any official source of information that is a state entity. You can rely on them for accurate information.
And in that sense, Mr. Tsoi Fatt, and we'll talk about the collaboration that is taking place with the tripartite involvement in all these issues related to disaster preparedness before we conclude. Just does that put a greater responsibility to provide real-time information by all these different agencies? Because we're operating in an era now, if people don't get the information right away from the reputable agencies, they'll get it somewhere else.
Yeah, well, and that is important, yes, and there's where your national center in terms of coordination comes in, because all reports feed in there and they are disseminated from there, and usually there's a mechanism for representation from each critical sector so that you have access to accurate information. What we found helpful in the ERHA also is that we've established, I mean, we use the social media to our advantage. We've established a WhatsApp group, for example, and all the management team, there's a general one also where information is passed quickly, and people are instructed, you do not pass any information on those things unless it's verified information, so that we try to reinforce the sharing of accurate information among our staff, so that you reduce panic and that type of thing, because it is a potential for panic.
It is, and before we conclude this morning, you wanted to highlight the work that is being done as far as the tripartite sort of collaboration.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that we are, for example, educating our staff. So we start with the staff, and we have this family emergency plan that Alana pointed out, so that all our staff are going to be given a copy of this and encouraged to prepare their own home disaster preparedness plan. Because one of the things you have to understand is that you can't take a person from their own family circumstances to run a health sector, a health institution, when they're worried about what is happening at home.
Correct.
So we encourage staff to be prepared themselves. Then we encourage the community to be prepared. And that reduces the demands upon our system if the community is resilient and takes responsibility for some of itself. And then, of course, the issue of leadership. So that, for example, in this case, after the disaster, we would have had reports on the facilities from the users and the community. That's the first level. The second level would have come yesterday when we had the teams from public health and so on going out to assess all our facilities, all right, and all critical institutions within the communities. And then the third level comes when you escalate that, for example, and you have support from the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Works, etc., where you need to escalate if there are any damages observed. Also, in terms of leadership from our Ministry of Health, that's in place. They had, put together their EOC kind of thing, arrangement, and so we were in constant communication with them. We were advised, for example, yesterday to cancel our afternoon clinics, outpatients clinics,
right,
and elective surgeries. Very practical suggestions, all right, and requests, so that you reduce risk in your facilities. But it's important that you have that constant communication between staff, communities, as well as the leadership in terms of the sector, policy-driven and that type of thing.
And before we conclude, as you talk about communication, if anybody wants to communicate with the ERHA, Eastern Regional Health Authority, either via telephone contact or on social media and so on, what would be the contact information? Okay,
we are on Facebook, all right, at ERHA. So they can actually Google ERHA on Facebook and they'll find us.
Right.
We have a website, all right. We have an 800 ERHA number also.
Right.
So that we are readily accessible, all our facilities. And we in the emergency plan, we're publishing all our numbers and all that.
Indeed, and very important to keep all that information out there, especially as we said, with everyone trying to copycat what is being done by the official agencies and coming up with all sorts of bogus bits of information. So we urge you, as always, please ensure that if you're looking for any information in a disaster or outside of a disaster, try to go to the reliable sources first and foremost, and of course you'll be able to know who would be the reliable sources based on how reliable that information would have been over the weeks, months and years. Thanks very much for taking the time to be with us this morning to give us a sense in the continuing aftermath and the reaction to what would have occurred on Tuesday evening, and even the little shake-up that we had on Wednesday morning, which for many wasn't a little shake-up because people were so traumatized by what happened on Tuesday evening. We'll be back right after this break.
You can't doubt me. Facts is history. Old time people will know how we come to be so bound together. One another, nothing could separate me from sincerity.